Well, we are in session 6 of our study of the book of Daniel. And we went through chapters 1 through 5 up through last session. But we're inserting sort of an addendum on Babylon. We talked, obviously, in Daniel chapter 5 with the fall of Babylon to the Persians. Historically, that happened in 539 BC. It's well documented. And many of your Bible helps, of course, will help you with that, except most of them make a mistake. Most of them assume, incorrectly, that Babylon was destroyed when it fell to the Persians. Quite the contrary. They took it over without a battle. And I mention that not to disparage many of the good helps that are around, but you will discover that most of them fall into the trap of assuming that the fall of Babylon and the doom of Babylon are the same thing. And so because of that, we're going to devote this session to talking about what really happened to Babylon since that fall, because it turns out not just a question of correcting an erroneous history, but it has profound implications for each one of us in this room, and in fact, gives us one of those marvelous chances to test our hermeneutics, to put an empirical test to our theories of interpretation. This is very dear to me for a lot of reasons, because I grew up very interested in the Word of God in the 40s. I got very interested as a teenager. And in those days, I can remember the debates among good scholars about whether Israel would ever be back in the land. Some of you are old enough to remember, and some of you may be too old to remember, during World War II, there were some commentators that felt that Hitler was the Antichrist, and they would take that view. But there were a few, M.R.D. Hahn, Ironside, and several others, that said no matter how it looks, it couldn't be the Antichrist because Israel was not in the land. They knew their Bible well enough to know that was a precondition to what we call the end times. Now, those debates were quite intense. People who took the Bible literally, seriously, as the way I express it, recognized that Israel was yet to actually return to the land of Israel. Some of the liberals, modernists, most of the denominations felt that, well, that's just all allegorical, and so they had their various ways of trying to get around that. Well, on May 14th of 1948, when David Ben-Gurion, using Ezekiel as his authority, declared the name of the new Jewish homeland as Israel, that should have ended the debate. Those of us that took the Bible literally rejoiced because that was exactly what was expected for 2,000 years, or better part thereof. We face a similar situation today. There are really good scholars that disparage any implications or relevance to the fact that Saddam Hussein has been rebuilding Babylon. You're going to see why in this session we take a different view. And our view, I think, is going to also lead to an opportunity to test our perception of the end-time scenario. So we're going to talk about not the fall of Babylon, that was last time, the mystery of Babylon this time. And this is like an addendum to the last chapter. In this session, we're going to go from the fall of Babylon last time to the doom of Babylon as it is prophesied in Isaiah 13 and 14, Jeremiah 50 and 51, and Revelation 17 and 18. And most of you recall that I encouraged you sometime this past week to read those 6 chapters. They're 3 pairs. Each one, they're 3 pairs of chapters. And to read them in one sitting so that the language is fresh in your mind and come to your own conclusions. And then we're going to talk, having done that, we're going to talk about what's going on in Babylon today and what we suspect will occur in the coming months. And the most important city in Iraq is rarely mentioned in the news. That's the most important city. It's not Baghdad. It's Babylon. You'll see why in a minute. So we're going to look at the doom of Babylon here. Well, last time the Persians took over, you recall, Belshazzar threw his party. The handwriting on the wall showed up, which shook him up. Daniel interpreted it for him. And while that was going on, the Persian army had previously gotten control of the Euphrates upriver and diverted it, so the river that fed Babylon's moat and other things dropped, and as Herodotus records, they slipped in under the gates, took the city over. there are actually records that indicate that some of the residents of the city didn't even know it for 3 days. It was more like a coup d'etat rather than an armed war. In fact, you may recall that Cyrus, in his Cylinder of Cyrus, brags to the world that he conquered Babylon without a battle. He claimed, in fact, among his many titles, that he's now king of Babylon. He made his son Cambyses his viceroy in Babylon. And things remained peaceful there for some time until Cyrus finally dies. And Darius II takes over, and after him came some other guys that I won't try to pronounce their names, but they called themselves Nebuchadnezzar III and IV. When Saddam Hussein calls himself Nebuchadnezzar II, I know he's making a point to an illiterate group, but actually if he's going to call himself a Nebuchadnezzar, it'd have to be fifth, because there's been several between. But that's neither here nor there. About the 4th year of Xerxes, this is the leader of the Persian Empire, during which the episodes of Esther take place. One of the most dramatic books in the Bible. And very interesting character, by the way. But anyway, during his reign, the Babylonians made another attempt to gain their independence, but they were quickly suppressed with much cruelty and damage to Babylon. However, in 460 BC, Herodotus, this famous writer who is known in literature as the father of history, very prolific writer, very important to the Greeks. Anyway, he visited the city, and he reported that it was virtually intact. Yes, damaged from the previous rebellion, but intact. Well, by this time, Greece is on the rise, and by 331, Alexander, the Great, as we call him, was welcomed by the Babylonians when he entered the city after his victory over the Medes in Gaugamela, which really established him. This young man conquered the known world in his 20s. He said at 29 to have fallen on his bed weeping, there were no more worlds left to conquer. He conquered all the way to India. He's a legend for many reasons, a very fascinating character. And he was acclaimed as king of Babylon. And 9 years later, he had planned extensive renovations of Babylon. He was going to make a port for 1,000 warships. Now, that may seem strange to you, but if you look at a map, it looks like it's very much inland, but it's very marshy. Apparently, the concept was to have a massive dredging thing to create a port for Babylon. But he passes away in 323, and 4 of his key generals divide the empire up. And that's going to be important to us as we get in later chapters, and Daniel will go through all that. Now, his career, fascinatingly enough, is detailed in advance. Daniel lives to rise to power in Babylon, but he also then rises to power in the Persian Empire. And we're going to talk about that in our next session. Some very dramatic episodes that occurred when the Persians took over. Daniel has occasion to rise to a similar role in the Persian Empire that he had in the Babylonian Empire. And that will be important for you to understand, not only to understand parts of Daniel, but most people do not understand what was going on at Christmas, then when you celebrate the so-called 3 wise men, the Magi. What's that all about? Those trails lead back to Daniel. We'll talk about that next time. But the point is, Alexander, that comes after, Daniel has passed away by then. But Alexander's career is detailed in advance, and we're going to experience that when we get to Daniel chapter 8. Also, what's even more astonishing, his successors for the next 400 years are also detailed in advance. They speak of the 400 years between the Old and New Testaments as the silent years, because there are no books covering that period. Well, that's not quite true, actually. You'll discover that Daniel chapter 11, verses 5 through 35, detail the struggles between the Seleucids and the Ptolemies, which, of course, between which Israel is a buffer state. So we'll talk about that when we get to Daniel 11. So the Greek Empire, you need to understand that Alexander made Babylon his capital. He died there. So Babylon was not destroyed by the Persians. It serves as a capital 2 centuries later. And the 4 generals divide up his empire. Cassander took the far west, Macedonia and Greece. Lysimachus took Thrace, Bithynia, and most of Asia Minor. Ptolemy took the south, which included Egypt, very powerful in those days, Cyrene and Arabia. And he, by the way, it was Ptolemy Philadelphus that sponsors the translation of the Hebrew scriptures into Greek, that what we call the Septuagint version, usually abbreviated LXX, which is a Roman numeral for 70, the Septuagint, which is a very, very valuable document because it, for several reasons. First of all, it gives us a Greek perception by the best Hebrew scholars of that day as to what the Hebrew text says. Furthermore, it's the Septuagint that becomes the Christian's Bible during the New Testament period. Most of the quotes in the New Testament are quotes from the Septuagint version of the Old Testament. And so there's much, that's a very important thing to be aware of. And Seleucus, of course, took the Assyria east all the way to India. And Ptolemy and Seleucus are struggling then over the centuries over this ground between them, which of course includes Judea. And one of the Seleucid emperors, or I should say kings, was Antiochus Epiphanes, Antiochus IV. He called himself the Epiphanes, the enchanted one, the exalted one. The kids on the street call him Epimanes, which means the madman. But he's the little horn. He's referred to as the little horn in Daniel 8, and we'll talk about that when we get there. But again, the silent years are profiled in advance, as I emphasized. But what happens next in the history of Babylon, it starts to atrophy. The Seleucids created another city on a little slightly more favorable, a better location for the caravan routes, and so Babylon begins to get to atrophy. The trade is drawn to this other city. And so Babylon's on the Euphrates, Seleucid was on the river Tigris. Between those two rivers is, by the way, what we call Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia means between those two rivers, between the two rivers. Anyway, because this rival city is starting to prosper, it expedited the decline of the ancient metropolis of Babylon. But when you get to 75 AD, in the what I call just post-New Testament period, the merchants there are still trying to make a go of it. We have records of that. And in fact, when you get to a century later, or anyway, at 115 AD, Emperor Trajan from Rome visits there. And 199 AD, Septimus Severus, subsequent emperor, reports, he visited there and reports that it's deserted. It's still there, not destroyed, but deserted. But when you get to the 19th century, a German archaeologist by the name of Robert Koldewey is very famous for having done some of the early excavations of ancient Babylon. He's able to hire locals. There are about 10,000 inhabitants there at a village, it shows us Hilla on the maps, but it's basically the ancient site of Babylon. When you look at the military maps of Desert Storm, down there in that area near Hilla, you see it says large ancient buildings. It's not labeled Babylon, but that's really what we're talking about. And so the mystery of Babylon, and it's more important for you and I, the prophetic destiny. You can look at the Bible from Genesis to Revelation in a sense like the tale of two cities. You have, in effect, Jerusalem, which is presented as the city of God, despite all its problems, and Babylon is the city of man, or some people even would call it the city of Satan. And so the struggle between the two, the contrast between the two, at least idiomatically, is all through the Scripture. Babylon is mentioned over 300 times in the Bible. It's alluded to 3 times in Christ's genealogy, strangely enough. And it was the capital. Here's one of the other things that I think is very important to keep in mind. It was the capital of the first world dictator, a guy by the name of Nimrod, which means we rebel. It's my suspicion personally, but it's just my conjecture, that it will again be the capital of the last world dictator, who I'll just dub rhetorically here as Nimrod II. But the fall of Babylon, we saw last week, occurred without a battle, became Alexander's capital, atrophied over the centuries, presently being rebuilt by Saddam Hussein. However, the passages in the Old Testament, in Isaiah and Jeremiah specifically, mention that it'll never, once it's destroyed, it's going to be destroyed rather dramatically, and once that happens, it'll never again be inhabited. The building materials will never be reused. In fact, both Isaiah and Jeremiah use this strange expression, it'll fall like Sodom and Gomorrah, which, as you recall from Genesis 19, came down suddenly, catastrophically. So, and there's another issue that we'll touch on. We could spend a lot of time on, we'll just touch on. What about this strange thing that's called Mystery Babylon in Revelation. There it's used idiomatically in another way. Is that different? Some people say it is. Or is it both the same? I think both are true, and we'll show you why. In Isaiah 13, some issues we're going to see here before we get into this. What about Babylon today? That's one of the questions we're going to try to deal with. Will it be the capital for the final world dictator? And if that's so, what specifics should we be watching for? Most prophecy books that you may have seen that have come out have overlooked some of these startling passages that will affect each of us over the coming months and years ahead. Let's just jump in and take a look at these passages. We're going to jump into Isaiah 13. We're not going to go into detail here. They're lengthy, but I want to skim through them and give you a flavor. I want you to savor the taste, the text here. Isaiah 13, starting at verse 1, the burden of the Massa, if you will, of Isaiah the son of Amos did see. Lift ye up the banner upon the high mountain, exalt the voice unto them, shake the hand that they may go into the gates of the nobles. I have commanded my sanctified ones, I have also called my mighty ones for mine anger. Ooh, even them that rejoice in my highness. So God is calling his top brass into this picture here. The noise of a multitude in the mountains, like as of a great people. A tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together. The Lord of hosts mustereth the host of the battle. Babylon fell in 539 to the Persians. Here we're talking about kingdoms and of the nations. It's a much more worldwide concern, apparently. Verse 5, they come from a far country, from the end of heaven, even the Lord, and the weapons of his indignation. To do what? To destroy the whole land. Ooh. Howl ye, for the day of the Lord is at hand. That's a very key phrase in the Old Testament. The day of the Lord is at hand. It shall come as a destruction from the Almighty. Therefore shall all hands be faint, every man's heart shall melt, and they shall be afraid. Pangs and sorrows shall take hold of them, and they shall be in pain as a woman that travaileth. They shall be amazed at one another, their faces shall be as flames. Behold, here it comes again, the day of the Lord. See, it says it a second time. The day of the Lord cometh, cruel, both with wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate, and he shall destroy the sinners thereof out of it. This, of course, ties it with these passages in Joel and elsewhere where the day of the Lord is the primary theme in those passages. But I want you to notice verse 10. For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in his going forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine. There are some people try to link this to nuclear winter and so forth. That's maybe going a bit far, but in any case, it certainly is something that gets everyone's attention, and it certainly is not stuff that happened back in 539 when the Persians slipped in and took over. Verse 11, and I will punish the world. Ooh, I will punish the world for their evil, and the wicked for their iniquity, and I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease, and will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. You know, it's interesting, it's important to be sensitive to how God hates pride, how he hates the arrogant. It astonishes me to find people in the Christian ministry that are unabashedly arrogant. I'm surrounded by some good friends who promise to take me apart if I start taking myself seriously. I listen to some of these people on the radio and I'm astonished, not just because I may have some difference of opinion, but for the mean-spirited arrogance that characterizes certain ministries. It's amazing to me. I will make man more precious than fine gold, even a man than the golden wedge of Ophir. Therefore I will shake the heavens, get this, and the earth shall remove out of her place. Boy, that caught my eye many years ago when I had a superficial participation in a study by one of the government contractors, which was to determine the impacts of a gigaton weapon. It turns out it would alter the orbit of the earth. In the wrath of the Lord of hosts and in the day of his fierce anger. And it shall be as the chased roe and as a sheep that no man taketh up, that they shall every man turn to his own people and flee every one into his own land. Every one that is found shall be thrust through. Ooh. Every one that is joined unto them shall fall by the sword. Their children also shall be dashed to pieces before their eyes. Their houses shall be spoiled and their wives ravished. Behold, I will stir up the Medes against them, which shall not regard silver, or as for gold, they shall not delight in it. In other words, they won't be money motivated. Now, because the Medes are mentioned here, causes many scholars to assume this relates then to the Medes and the Persians back in 539. And that's understandable if there was no other evidence. From all the other evidence, clearly this was not referring to what happened back in 539, but then who are the Medes? And many scholars believe that the Medes are the Kurds. And so it's interesting, the Kurds do indeed have major hostility towards Iraq, the leadership in Iraq. They were the Kurds that were gassed. You know, Saddam Hussein used chemical weapons against his own people, those that were not ethnically in step with his program. So the Medes have some deep hostility here, obviously. Their bows shall they dash the young men to pieces, and they shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb. Their eyes shall not spare children. And Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency. That's an important phrase, by the way. This is Babylon on the banks of the Euphrates. It's a Chaldean entity. It's not an idiom for New York or for Rome. This is understood by Isaiah and Jeremiah to be Chaldean in its makeup. The beauty of the Chaldees' excellency shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. Both Isaiah and Jeremiah will make that allusion. Here's a key phrase: it shall never be inhabited, neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. Neither shall the Arabian pitch tent there, neither shall the shepherds make their fold there. That's an interesting phrase, by the way, because Babylon is nowhere near Arabia. The dominance of Arabia is implicit in this picture. I think that's kind of interesting. But the main point is you get the impression that it's not inhabitable. That certainly is not true through the centuries. It still is. So whatever's going on here hasn't happened yet. That's the main point I'm trying to put before us here. Let's continue. But the wild beasts of the desert shall lie there, and their houses shall be full of doleful creatures, and owls shall dwell there, and satyrs shall dance there. And by the way, this language in the Hebrew is often, not always, but often used of demons. These may be idiomatic uses of these terms. But anyway, let's move on. And the wild beasts of the island shall cry in their desolate houses, and the dragons in their pleasant palaces. And her time is near to come, and her days shall not be prolonged. So let's go next chapter continue. For the Lord will have mercy on Jacob, and will yet choose Israel, and set them in their own land. Really? Yes. And the stranger shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. And the people shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids, and they shall take them captives, whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors. In the year that King Ahaz died was this burden: rejoice not, thou whole Palestina. By the way, I've skipped a chunk here. There's a whole section I've skipped that where Isaiah focuses on the origin of Satan. And it's familiar to most of you, but in order, because it is, I skipped ahead here. Rejoice not, thou whole Palestina. Palestine, interesting. I wonder how Isaiah knew it was going to be renamed by the Romans. Isn't that interesting? Because the rod of him that smote thee is broken, for out of the serpent's root shall come forth a cockatrice, and his fruit shall be a fiery flying serpent. And the firstborn of the poor shall feed, and the needy shall lie down in safety, and I will kill thy root with famine, and he shall slay thy remnant. Howl, O gate, cry, O city, thou whole Palestina, art dissolved, for there shall come from the north a smoke, and none shall be alone in his appointed times. What shall one then answer the messengers of the nation? That the Lord hath founded Zion, and the poor of his people shall trust in it. Well, and it goes on. Let's take a look at Jeremiah. That's Jeremiah passage 15:51 is lengthier. I'll do just most of the excerpts as we go through this. The word of the Lord spake against Babylon and against the land of the Chaldeans by Jeremiah the prophet. Notice that again. It's Babylon and against the land of Chaldeans. So Babylon is not being used here as an idiom or a symbol of New York or America or London or Paris or Rome or whatever. Declare ye among the nations, and publish and set up a standard, publish and conceal not. Say, Babylon is taken, Bel is confounded. Merodach, that's the one, these are their gods, is broken in pieces. Her idols are confounded. Her images broken in pieces. For out of the north there cometh up a nation against her, which shall make her land desolate, and none shall dwell therein. They shall remove, they shall depart, both man and beast. In those days, and at that time, saith the Lord, the children of Israel shall come, they and the children of Judah together, going and weeping. They shall go and seek the Lord their God. That's exciting. See, Israel is in the land when this is going on. For lo, I will raise and cause to come up against Babylon an assembly of great nations. This is a global deal here. Assembly of great nations from the north country. And they shall set themselves in array against her. From thence she shall be taken. Their arrows shall be as of a mighty expert man. None shall return in vain. I have read verse 9 many times. It's only recently that has been pointed out to me by some Hebrew grammatical experts what is really saying in that last phrase. From thence shall she be taken. Their arrows shall be as of a mighty expert man. When you read that, you think, well, it's talking about the shooter. No, it's talking about the arrows. None shall return vain. The word arrow is katis. It's what it refers to something shot from an engine of war, like, or from a bow by hand, if you will. Therefore, it's typically viewed, obviously, as an arrow, but it could be other things. The Septuagint, that is the Greek, it's a noun, nominative, feminine, singular, common. It's a missile or anything thrown, such as an arrow or javelin, okay? And by the way, do you know what the defensive missile of Israel is called? The arrow. Arrow 2 at this point. But it's this other phrase I want to highlight to you, as of a mighty expert man. The word is sakal. It means to be prudent, circumspect, wisely understand, and prosper. That's what the word means. It's a hifil participle masculine singular absolute, which means, in effect, it refers to the arrow. The arrow will have insight. The arrow will give attention to, consider, ponder, be prudent, and have comprehension. The arrow is a smart arrow. The Greek translation of this, it means intelligent or possessing understanding. This arrow that's being shot is an intelligent weapon. Now, so you don't misunderstand this, Jeremiah adds, none shall return in vain. In other words, these things can't miss. In the New American Standard, it says their arrow shall be like an expert warrior who does not return empty-handed. That is, the arrows don't return empty-handed. Their arrows shall be, in the NIV, the arrows shall be like skilled warriors who do not return empty-handed. It's not the skill of the archer, it's a characteristic of the arrow, the intelligence in the arrow. They can't miss. This is really, interestingly enough, a technology statement. I need to collect these. I think they're fascinating. There are technology statements all through the Scripture, and this is one of them. We're talking about smart bombs, smart missiles, whatever. Let's move on. Verse 13. Because of the wrath of the Lord it shall not be inhabited, but it shall be wholly desolate. Everyone that goeth by Babylon shall be astonished and hiss at all her plagues. Put yourselves in array against Babylon round about. All ye that bend the bow, shoot at her. Spare no arrows, for she hath sinned against the Lord. Skipping down a little further, and I will bring Israel again to his habitation. He shall feed on Carmel and Bashan, and his soul shall be satisfied upon Mount Ephraim and Gilead. In those days and at that time, saith the Lord, the iniquity of Israel shall be sought for, and there shall be none. And the sins of Judah, and they shall not be found, for I will pardon them whom I reserve. Praise God for that. And I have laid a snare for thee, and thou art also taken, O Babylon. Thou wast not aware. Thou art found, thou art also caught, because thou hast striven against the Lord. The Lord hath opened his armory, and hath brought forth the weapons of his indignation. Oh boy. And for this is the work of the Lord God of hosts in the land of the Chaldeans. There it is again. This is clearly very provincial here. Therefore, the wild beasts of the desert with the wild beasts of the islands shall dwell there, and the owls shall dwell therein, and it shall be no more inhabited forever. It shall be no more inhabited forever, Jeremiah says. Neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. As God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah and the neighbor cities thereof, saith the Lord, so shall no man abide there, neither shall any son of man dwell therein. Behold, a people shall come from the north, and a great nation, and many kings shall be raised up from the coasts of the earth. And they shall hold the bow and the lance, and they are cruel, and they will not show mercy. Their voice shall roar like the sea, and they shall ride upon horses, everyone put in array like a man to the battle against thee, O daughter of Babylon. And then 51 continues, Israel hath not been forsaken, nor Judah of his God, of the Lord of hosts, though their land was filled with sin against the Holy One of Israel. Though their land was filled with sin against the Holy One of Israel. Interesting. Flee out of the midst of Babylon, deliver every man his soul, but be not cut off in her iniquity, for this is the time of the Lord's vengeance. He will render unto her a recompense. Babylon hath been a golden cup. Ooh, that's interesting. That echoes in the book of Revelation when you read that part of it. Babylon hath been a golden cup in the Lord's hand, and he hath made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunken of her wine, therefore the nations are mad. Babylon is suddenly fallen and destroyed. Howl at for her. Take balm for her pain, if so be she may be healed. I will also break in pieces, and with thee the shepherd and his flock, and with thee will I break in pieces the husbandman and his yoke of oxen, and with thee will I break in pieces captains and rulers. And I will render unto Babylon and to all the inhabitants of Chaldea all their evil that they have done in Zion in your sight with the Lord. Behold, I am against thee, O destroying mountain, saith the Lord, which destroyeth all the earth. Woo boy. And I will stretch out mine hand upon thee, I will roll thee down from the rocks, and I will make thee a burnt mountain. They will not take of thee a stone for a corner, nor a stone for the foundations, but thou shalt be desolate forever, saith the Lord. Set ye up a standard in the land, blow the trumpet among the nations, prepare the nations against her, call together against the kingdoms of Ararat, Minni, and Ashkenaz. Appoint a captain against her, cause the horses to come up as the rough caterpillars. That's interesting. Prepare against her, ye nations, with kings and the Medes, captains thereof, and all the rulers thereof, all the land of his dominion. The land shall tremble in sorrow, for every purpose of the Lord shall be performed against Babylon, to make the land of Babylon a desolation without an inhabitant. That's not true today. The mighty men of Babylon have forborne to fight. They have remained in their holes. Their might have failed. They became as women. They have burned her dwelling places. Her bars are broken. For thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, the daughter of Babylon is like a thrashing floor. It is time to thrash her, yet a little while, and the time of her harvest shall come. That's an idiom very frequently used in the Old Testament of what we call the Great Tribulation. It's very provocative to me that in the book of Ruth, who is the Gentile bride of the kinsman redeemer, is at his feet in chapter 3 during the thrashing floor scene. I think it's exciting. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, hath devoured me. He hath crushed me. He hath made me an empty vessel. He hath swallowed me up like a dragon. He hath filled his belly with my delicates. He hath cast me out. And Babylon shall become a heap, a dwelling place for dragons, and astonishment and hissing without an inhabitant. And it goes on, obviously, in this whole vein as we keep going here. And how is Shishak taken? The word Shishak, by the way, happens to be an example of encryption, Atbash. And it's just a historical oddity to people studying encryption, but it's provocative here for some supernatural reasons. But let's move on. And how is the praise of the whole earth surprised? How is Babylon become an astonishment among the nations? The sea has come up upon Babylon. She is covered with the multitude of the waves thereof. Her cities are desolation, a dry land, and a wilderness, a land wherein no man dwelleth, and so on. Pretty much it keeps up this way. The doom of Babylon. The fall of Babylon, 539, without a battle, became a capital, atrophied over the centuries, and is presently being rebuilt. The destruction of Babylon in the Old Testament emphasizes it will never be inhabited. The building materials will never be reused like Sodom and Gomorrah. Do you see that they're different? That gives us, as in our hermeneutics, a theory of interpretation, a difficulty. Either you've got to allegorize somehow this language as applying to things that happened in the past, which we find inappropriate, or this is something yet to happen in the future. Now, for it to happen in the future means that Babylon has to rise to be once again a major power center, to receive this judgment. And therein lies the challenge here. And Mystery Babylon and Revelation being part of that. You can make your own chart if you want, where you take these 6 chapters, Isaiah 13:14, Jeremiah 15:51, and Revelation 17:18, and make a list of the attributes or emphases that you find here. Many nations attacking is all through here. Israel's in the land and forgiven. Both Isaiah and Jeremiah allude to that. Like Sodom and Gomorrah, Isaiah 13:19 and Jeremiah 50:40, both use that phrase. Isaiah and Jeremiah emphasize never to be inhabited. The bricks are never, in fact, the bricks will never be reused, according to Jeremiah. And when does this all happen? During the day of the Lord. And all of this ties, of course, to the book of Revelation, but it's a literal Chaldean Babylon, not an idiom for some metropolitan, financial center present today. And of course, there are these strange allusions to the king's fornication, being drunk with wine, and scarlet, purple, and golden cup. Those are all phrases that come out of Jeremiah 51, verse 7, but also are amplified in Revelation in a half a dozen verses. So let's take a quick look at just part of the book of Revelation, which speaks in a slightly different idiom, and yet they overlap somewhat. Revelation 17, there came up one of the 7 angels, which had 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, and I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. This is the mother of harlots here, we're going to see. And many commentators see all kinds of reasons that this seems to fit, in some respects, the Roman Catholic Church. Now, you may be offended at that, and I encourage you, if you want to explore that, there are many places to do that. Alexander Hislop did a classic study back in the 1800s, but by far the best study out is David Hunt's book, A Woman Rides the Beast. And he titles it that way because he wants to emphasize the woman is not the beast. She rides the beast. The woman is the whore here described. And she takes advantage of the world system, but that world system at the end turns and consumes her. So don't confuse the two. But here he's talking about the judgment of the great whore that sitteth by many waters. And fornication is often used all through the Bible to allude to false worship, not just in a denotative sexual sense, as we would use the term. In a broader sense, it's used of false worship. And the kings of the earth have committed fornication. The inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. And he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast. We believe that's the beast that's also described in Revelation 13. A scarlet-colored beast full of names and blasphemy and having 7 heads and 10 horns. And there's the connector, if you will, to the idioms that are used in Revelation 13. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. So here the idioms link with, if you will, the Jeremiah passage. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. All false worship on the planet Earth had its origins in Babel. The Babylonian system, the priesthood there, is the priesthood that when the Persians took over from Babylon, moved to Pergamus. And when the Greeks conquered that, it moved again. And when the Romans conquered the Greeks, it moved to Rome. All these things that you read about that's associated with pagan Rome are Latin names for the Babylonian system. The same priests, the same stories, the same idols, just have new names. And there's plenty of documentation. You check that out if you're interested to get into that. So here's Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunk, get this, drunken with the blood of the saints. This is a system that murdered Christians. One pope murdered more Christians than all the Roman emperors put together one afternoon. You need to understand the history of Europe from the point of view of the struggle for temporal power by the papacy, if you could really understand the dynamics that make up European history, the medieval church, etc. Drunken with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. I saw a woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great awe. Admiration is perhaps an unfortunate translation. And he saith unto me, The waters which thou sawest where the whore sitteth are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore. They shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. In other words, they ultimately turn on her. For God hath put it in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree and to give their kingdom unto the beast until the words of God shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. And many scholars make a point from this verse that the city that reigned over the kings of the earth, especially when John was penning this, was none other than Rome. And that's why we get a link, if you will, to these idioms to the Roman system. We'll come back to that. You can notice that the prostitute is not the beast, but rides the beast. She exploits the beast, but eventually it turns and is destroyed by it. The reference to the cup is again a link with Jeremiah and so forth. Mystery Babylon is the false religious system that has been identified with the city of Rome from the early centuries unto this present hour. I know that may offend many, but you need, and if it does, fine. Do your homework. Come to your own conclusions. Let's move on to Revelation 18, which is the same, and yet it's a little different. After these things, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, is fallen. When it's doubled like that, it not only intensity, it implies quickly. Babylon the great is fallen, fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and the cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Here's an idiom that you'll tie you to Matthew 13, where the church grows to be a monstrosity. Not a bush that's 3 feet high, that's what a mustard tree usually, but to a tree that's so large the birds less than a brain. And who are those birds? Earlier, it's the ministers of Satan. So you want to check out Matthew 13 in this background. But let's move on. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. The merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, that ye receive not of her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Reward her even as she had rewarded you, and double unto her, double according to her works, in the cup which she had filled, fill to her double. How much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Strange phrase for this whore to say, I sit a queen, and I'm no widow. What is she saying? If you studied Hosea, you know that's intended to be a contrast to Israel, because Israel is viewed idiomatically as widowed and divorced in Hosea and elsewhere. I sit a queen and am no widow, she claims, and shall see no sorrow. That's what her claim is. She's really wrong about that. Therefore shall her place come in one day, death and mourning and famine. She shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judgeth her. And here we have 3 groups of people singled out. Get this. And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication, lived deliciously with her, shall bewail her and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off for the fear of her torment. That's kind of physical. That's kind of standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. Now another group shows up. The merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn for her, for no man buyeth their merchandise anymore. The merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones, of pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and thyine wood, and all manner of vessels of ivory, and all manner of vessels of most precious wood, and of brass and of iron and marble, and cinnamon and odors and ointments and frankincense and wine and oil and fine flour, and wheat and beasts and sheep and horses and chariots and slaves and souls of men. 28 specific elements of merchandise. Why are they there? I believe, if nothing else, so we don't spiritualize this, it's literal. We're talking about literal cargoes, literal merchandise. You follow what I'm saying? All attempts to categorize and analyze this falls apart, because it's just a list of cargoes. And the fruits of thy soul lusted after are departed from thee. All the things which are dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. The merchants of these things, which were made rich by her, get this again, same phrase, shall stand afar off for fear of her torment. They're keeping their distance for fear of her torment, weeping and wailing and saying, Alas, alas, the great city that was clothed with fine linen and purple and scarlet and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. Wow. For in 1 hour so great riches has come to naught. Now there's a third group, every shipmaster and all the company and ships and sailors, and as many as trade by sea stood afar off and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like unto this great city? And they cast dust upon their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour is she made desolate. Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. The voice of the harpers, musicians, and of pipers and trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee, and no craftsman of whatever craft he be shall be found any more in thee. And the sound of a millstone shall be heard no more at all in thee. The light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee. The voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. Wow. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. And in her was found the blood of the prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. Wow. What on earth does Mystery Babylon refer to? There are people that write books that try to make America Mystery Babylon. And with all our faults, it doesn't fit in my mind. I think there's a deeper issue here we'll get into. Mystery Babylon, the great whore. She rides the beast with the 7 heads and 10 horns. She's the mother of harlots and abominations. And here's a key phrase: she's drunk with the blood of the saints. And that doesn't mean much to you until you study carefully the history of the church over the last 1,500 years. Babylon, the great city, in verse 18, is kings, merchants, and those that trade by sea. The 3 groups of people that bemoan her are the kings, merchants, and those that trade by sea. It's pretty clear to me that the people that bemoan her, indicate on what foundation she's laid, and that's world trade. That's world trade. Mother of harlots. All occultic practices, all of them, originated in Babylon. And Isaiah 47 is one of your references on that. Tammuz was the son of Nimrod, and his queen, Semiramis, was identified with the Babylonian sun god and worshipped following the winter solstice. They worshiped the sun god. And when the days become the shortest in the winters, when he's said to have died, and as the days get longer, he's said to be reborn. And they celebrate his rebirth with a Yule log. The word Yule is an infant in Chaldean. And they would burn this Yule log in the evening, and the next day we'd replace it with a trimmed tree the next morning that represented the rebirth of the sun god. And if you want to see that dramatized, check out Jeremiah chapter 10. If your friends, if you guys, it's fun with your Christian friends, if they're into Christmas trees, is to read Jeremiah 10 with them. That'll put them on a guilt trip. But don't get carried. We regard Christmas trees as an excursion into nostalgia, not the worship of the sun god. But you can have some fun with that if you want to put them on a trip here. Anyway, most of what you celebrate at Christmas has its roots not in Christianity, but in pagan Rome. The wassail bowl, the mistletoe, these are all fertility things, and on it goes. So, the Babylonian worship of Ishtar, the golden egg of Astarte. See, rabbits are symbolic of fertility. So is the golden egg of Astarte. Do you ever wonder how you got rabbits laying eggs at Easter? The rabbits don't lay eggs, but that doesn't occur to anybody. See, it's all a commingling of these ancient pagan superstitions. And of course, Astarte and Ishtar give us Easter and so forth. And by the way, the word Easter does not appear in Acts. You find it in your Bible. It's a mistranslation. It should have been Passover. Footnote. But anyway, it's interesting that the Bible can be viewed as a tale of 2 women. One is Israel, chapter 12. And the other one is the woman riding the beast. They're in contrast. The one is in heaven, the woman in heaven in Israel. The other was upon many waters. One is the mother of a man-child. That's not the church. The church didn't give birth to Christ. Israel gave birth to the Messiah. The other was the mother of harlots. One is clothed with the sun in chapter 12. The other one is clothed with purple scarlet. One's identity is the sun, moon, and the stars, which are idioms taken from Genesis 37, 38, where Joseph has his dreams and so forth. Where Jacob interprets those dreams, the sun, moon, stars represented Israel. And chapter 17, the identity there, she reigns over the kings of the earth. The one in chapter 12 has an enemy called the dragon, the big red dragon, which is explained to you in verse 9 of chapter 12. Obviously Satan. The enemy of the woman riding the beast is the kings, the 10 kings, interestingly enough. Let's talk about relationships. Israel's hated by the world. The other one is caressed by the world. Israel is sustained by the wings of heaven. The other one's sustained by the dragon. One has a headdress, a crown of 12 stars, which again refers to Jacob's interpretation, if you want to understand that it's Israel. The other one, of course, has the headdress of the mystery Babylon the Great. Israel's called widowed and divorced in the Old Testament. The other one brags that I'm no widow. Well, she's got a surprise coming. The final location of Israel, of course, is the New Jerusalem, and the final location of the one riding the beast is the habitation of demons. So anyway, we have Babylon was conquered by subsequent empires, and their entire religious system is transplanted. The priests always follow the money. First to Pergamus, and then to Rome. And as Christianity became established, not by Constantine, but by a second successor after him, became established as the official state religion of Rome, all the religious traditions they've been taught get repackaged, twisted, and relabeled. That's human nature. They were used to celebrating the Saturnalia, the big party on the winter solstice, December 22nd, 23rd, so it becomes Christmas. And Christmas doesn't show on the calendar until 454 AD. It doesn't show up in the New Testament at all. And there are books full of going in all the details of these different things. Many of our most cherished traditions have their roots in Babylon. The names of the days are taken from pagan religions. You can't escape this. They're everywhere. This is Satan's world. He is the prince of this world. Let's not forget that. You don't have to make a big trip of it. Just be sensitive to it. So, but there is a link. You say, gee, Chuck, I can see where Revelation allusions to Babylon seem to have to do with Rome. And yet I read Isaiah and Jeremiah, and it sounds like literal Babylon on the banks of the Euphrates. Which one's correct? At the pre-trib study group, when Dave Hunt's book came out, I was asked to do the rebuttal. Somebody presents the thing, and they have somebody else that has a different view to present the different view. And so they knew that Dave Hunt is so fixated on the Roman relationship with Babylon. That's the focus of his book, of course. And he, at least at that time, didn't ascribe any particular significance to the antics of Saddam Hussein there in Iraq. Everybody knew that I was very much into this issue of a literal Babylon emerging. So they had me do the rebuttal. And I shocked the whole audience of these scholars by pointing out both are true, and I believe they're linked by Zechariah 5. Let's take a look at Zechariah 5, verse 5. There's one of these strange little visions in Zechariah. It's not explained, it's just there. You draw your own conclusions. Zechariah says, Then the angel that talked with me went forth and said unto me, Lift up now thine eyes, and see what it is that goeth forth. Lift up now thine eyes. That's a phrase all through the Bible. It's an emphatic phrase. When Abraham's about to take Isaac with a knife, lift up now thine eyes, he sees the ram. In other words, it's a exclamatory phrase. Anyway, the angel says, Lift up now thine eyes and see what it is that goeth forth. And I said, What is it? He said, This is an ephah that goeth forth. And he said, Moreover, this is the resemblance throughout all the earth. Now, an ephah is not a common word for us. It was the common volumetric commercial measure in those days, roughly analogous to when we use the term a bushel. If you're a farmer, you know what a bushel is, okay? It's a similar, equivalent phrase. It's an ephah that went forth, and this is the resemblance throughout all the earth. And behold, there was lifted up a talent of lead. A talent here is a term of weight. It's the common commercial weight. It's about 97 pounds. It's a huge lead weight. Behold, there was lifted up a talent of lead, and this is a woman that sitteth in the midst of the ephah. Get the picture. Here's this great big tub. There's a woman in it. This lead lid is going to seal her in there. Kind of weird. It's a vision, by the way. It's not literal. It's a vision. And you with me so far? Okay. And he said, this, and he names the woman. This is wickedness. And he cast it into the midst of the ephah and cast the weight of the lead upon the mouth thereof. We're not through. It's weird enough already. Then lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, there came out two women. And the wind was in their wings. The word wing is ruach in the Hebrew. It says used as wind. It also can mean spirit. But anyway, the wind was in her wings. and they had wings like the wings of a stork. Now, if you track this one down, that's a mystery too, except you need to recognize this is Jewish. It's a Jewish vision to a Jewish prophet. A stork was an unclean bird. An unclean bird. And they lifted up the ephah between the earth and heaven. So again, this is a vision. So here's this woman called wickedness, sealed in this container. Two women, not angels, women came out with wings of a stork. They pick this up and they carry it between the earth and heaven. And I said to the angel that talked with me, whither do they bear the ephah? In other words, where are they going with this thing? And he said unto me, to build it in a house in the land of Shinar. It shall be established and set there upon her own base. Period. That's it. End of chapter. Change the subject to the next one. Wait a minute. What's this all about? Apparently, this is being carried to the land of Shinar. Now, the land of Shinar, the word Shinar occurs 7 times in the Bible. It refers to the area that Babylon sits. If Babylon is a city, Shinar is the county, so to speak. You with me? The plain of Shinar is where Babylon is. It's an idiom, it's a synonym for Babylon. To build a house in the land of Shinar. And by the way, that's a geographic designation. So I believe it means literal location. And it shall be established and set there upon her own base. Well, you can study this and come to your own conclusions. My personal suggestion, as a possibility, is that what's being poured, Babylon was the fountain of all that God abhors, all the false worship. It ultimately moves to Rome, where it has influenced the world at large for the better part of 2,000 years. I believe what the Bible is suggesting here is that the power center, somehow, is going to be brought back to Shinar, to Babylon, to reemerge there, to receive the judgment that God has proclaimed. That's a suggestion. I'm not going to say I'm not saying that that's clearly what's taught. It's at least one inference I draw from the text. So that gives us at least something to have our scanner up on and watch for. The ephah, a woman's called wickedness. She's sealed with a talent lead. It's carried by 2 men with wings of a stork between earth and heaven, to build it a house in the land of Shinar, which shall be established and set there upon her own base. Let's take now a look at Babylon. We've talked a lot about literal Babylon. Here is a satellite photograph of Babylon. It's 55 miles south, slightly west of south, from Baghdad. And if you look there, you'll see there's a large synthetic hill that's been built, on top of which is one of Saddam Hussein's elaborate palaces. We're going to get a good look at that in a minute. Then the ruins, just south of it, there are the ruins of what apparently were the original Tower of Babel, the ziggurat that was so famed in Genesis 10, 11, and so on. I've marked in the upper left-hand corner a section that we'll zero in on and take a better look at. This is that mound. You see the spiral drive going up there. You'll see pictures in a minute of with the military trucks and other things there. And to the right here, you have ancient Babylon. The processional way can be seen in the aerial photograph, the famed entrance to Babylon. And the area of Babylon itself, let's take this section and blow it up. There is the palace of Nebuchadnezzar. It's been rebuilt in part, not completely. The room that the handwriting on the wall took place has been rebuilt. Saddam Hussein spent a fortune getting the best archaeologists to confirm the foundations and then rebuilding it. He had affairs of state scheduled there as early as 1987. This is not a recent project. He's been working on this for a long time, spending a fortune doing this. The press makes fun of it, but for someone that has a biblical insight, this is profound, because these building materials are being reused. Processional way, and just across from the processional way over to the right is the museum. That's apparently the place where Belshazzar sent the guys to go get the temple instruments to use in his party, which of course led to the handwriting on the wall, and you remember that all from last time. Let's take a look at some footage that was given to me by the Marines. This is a picture of Saddam Hussein's palace. Bob Cornuke and I were contriving to go there and I wanted to get some footage before this gets all secured. And the word got around, and it turns out that some of our subscribers are in the Marines taking care of this, so they took this footage for me and then sent it to me with a letter from the Department of Defense saying this is unclassified, you can use it as you like. So this was just done a few months ago. And there's the ships that are being used. There's another shot of this palace that Saddam has built that overlooks the ancient ruins. And then there are the ruins that are just a little to the east of his palace. And you can see that in various states, some of them are there's a lot that hasn't been excavated, but there's much that has been. And this is some that hasn't, obviously ruins that undone. But we're going to go down there and take a look at some of this in a minute. This is Babylon. This is what Jeremiah and Isaiah are talking about. And these building materials are being reused. And there are people living there. And the ancient Babylon, they even gave me one of these bricks, by the way. But anyway, it's there. It's for real. And I think there's a final shot here of some people getting a tour here. Hang on a second. Let's see it here in a minute. Yeah, there they are. There's some troops going through and a guided tour. Tuesdays and Thursdays it's open if you make special arrangements. So the Marines have it. Now, the Shiites, by the way, are angling to try to take it over. They want to make it their capital, in contrast to the Jewish Jerusalem. My friend Tim LaHaye has indicated that he's heard talk of the UN moving there. And that sounds preposterous at first, except it turns out that people in the know indicate the UN is looking for an opportunity to move out of New York because they're crowded, they don't have enough office space, and they just as soon get out from under that supervision. And the New Yorkers, for their own reasons, would love to have them out of there for other reasons. So where would they move? Paris, Rome, and London are out of the question because of the constituent interests of the European Union, et cetera. What are they going to do? It sounds preposterous at first, but for them to establish a major power center right in the heart of the energy issue, which is the primary issue over the next couple of decades, not just for us particularly, but for Europe especially. Europe is desperate for oil. For us, it's very important, but we can manage without it if we have to. There's 100 years supply up in Edmonton, Canada. It's expensive because of the extraction, oil shale, but the extraction techniques are improving. And as oil gets more expensive, which it will, then those marginal techniques start to look more attractive. So the U.S. has problems, but not to the extent Europe has. For Europe, it's desperate. So oil is a major thing. But here's the challenge that I usually give audiences when I go travel and we talk about these things. I usually put this up on a screen and challenge the audience not to believe this. Don't accept what I'm putting on the screen or you flunk the course. I want you to challenge this. Here's my proposition. You and I are being plunged into a period of time about which the Bible says more than it does about any other period of time in history, including the time that Jesus walked the shores of Galilee or climbed the mountains of Judea. That's a preposterous statement. That we're moving into a period of time about which the Bible says more than it does about the gospel period, you've got to be kidding. Check it out. Come to your own conclusions. How do you do that? You've got to do two things. You've got to find out what the Bible says, not what Chuck Missler or whoever your favorite radio personality might be or whoever. No, find out yourself what the Bible says about these things. The second part of that used to be hard. It's not that hard today, but it does take work, and that is to find out what's going on. You will not find out what's going on the 10 o'clock news, trust me. You and I are victims of a media that takes pride in forming opinions rather than informing them. And that's a prostitution of that mandate. But in any case, there are ways to find out. There are alternative press opportunities. There's talk radio. There's all kinds of publications, over 1,000 proprietary newsletters that make their living entirely on their reliability, not by advertising they carry. And the internet. There's a lot of nonsense on the internet, but there's also some incredible resource on the internet. If you want just general news, WorldNet Daily, Newsmax, these are outstanding enterprises. There are others, many. In fact, if you really want to find out what's going on, one of the things you can do is log onto our website and sign up for what we call e-news. It's no charge. We will send you once a week, Monday it goes out, a one-page summary of what happened this week that's biblically relevant, and then it gives you the links on the net that are following that particular thing competently. People ask us, what websites do you watch? Hundreds. The question is what you're interested in. But E-News will give you a little 3 or 4 sentence paragraph typically on something that happened, be 4 or 5 of those on a single sheet typically, and there'll be a website or two that's following it. If you want to find out which Russian shipbuilding programs are behind schedule, you can find out. If you want to find out the president's agenda for tomorrow morning, it's on the internet. If you want to read the Supreme Court decisions of the decision that was handed down last week, the text is on the internet. If you know where to go, you can find out anything. You just have to know where to go. And E-News is one of the ways to put you right into those places that you probably will have interest in if you are biblically oriented in your outlook. So, now there's another issue here I'll touch on briefly because it impacts all of this. Where does Turkey fit in? Turkey is trying to join the European Union. It has not been able to make in. There's a big debate that should be resolved before this year is out. But where are they going to go? There's another major signpost. There's not only Babylon, the other one on the horizon is Turkey. Will Turkey set the stage for the Magog invasion as a prelude to the final chapter of the end times? Possibly. Or will Turkey be admitted to the European Union and signal a strategic extension of the Europe's ambitions into the Middle East? That's a possibility. There are a handful of nations. 10 nations joined the 15 this year, and there's 2 more coming in 2007. And the enigma that is not determined is Turkey. Where does it fit in? Turkey is a bridge between Europe and Asia. It's a very strategic. It's a member of NATO. It's tried for 8 decades. It changed its alphabet, its laws, its entire culture to try to be part of the West, and they're being rebuffed so far. And the reason that you want to watch for it is the prophetic role it apparently has in Ezekiel 38. Meshech and Tubal were the principal cities in Anatolia, which constitutes the eastern 2/3 of Turkey. And it clearly implies that Turkey will be a participant in this famed invasion, armed and led by Russia, into Israel. And although Turkey is presently pro-West, one can begin to anticipate them refocusing themselves towards the Islamic East. And that leads us to a quick glimpse of the Magog invasion, where we have Magog from the uttermost parts of the north arm and lead a group of nations into invasion in Israel. This passage in Ezekiel 38 and 39 is famous to prophecy buffs for 2 reasons. First of all, it is the occasion God uses to intervene on behalf of Israel. And the second reason is that it apparently alludes or anticipates the use of nuclear weapons. When does it occur? If you look at the fabled 70th week of Daniel, we'll be talking about more of this later in our study in Daniel, we know by the middle of that 7-year period, the temple will be rebuilt. We don't know when it's going to be rebuilt. It could be earlier or sometime the first half of that week. When the temple's rebuilt, we know it's going to be desecrated, and that triggers a period that Jesus himself labels as the Great Tribulation. He labels it by quoting Daniel 12. And that 7-year period is climaxed by the Battle of Armageddon, which is followed by the Second Coming and the establishment of the millennium. So far, so good. The question is, where does the Magog invasion fit? The classic placement by many, like Hal Lindsey and others, is as part of that Armageddon scenario, and he may prove to be correct. Even to this day, if he was here on the platform, he would defend this viewpoint. And it certainly is very defendable. He may prove to be right. There are some of us, however, myself, Grant Jeffries, Chuck Smith, and some others, that believe Magog invasion is separate and occurs earlier. Not critical, except to make one point. All of us agree that the Magog invasion will occur after the rapture of the church. And that puts us in a peculiar position because we think the Magog invasion is very, very close. But if it's close, the rapture is even closer. As we usually quip, if you're driving down the street and the stores are starting to decorate for Christmas, you know that Thanksgiving is not far away. Ezekiel 38:9, the occasion where God himself intervenes on behalf of Israel. That's why we believe it's post-rapture. And the passage does appear to anticipate the use of nuclear weapons. What do I mean by that? The leftover weapons provide all the energy needs for Israel for 7 years. The professionals are hired to clear the battlefield. They wait 7 months before entering the battlefield. Then then for 7 months they clean up everything they find. They bury east of the Dead Sea. Read that downwind. And if somebody passes through that region and finds something the professionals have missed, he doesn't touch it. He marks its location, lets the professionals deal with it. And that's exactly what most of us that have been in NBC warfare briefings understands the drill. Nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare, it's standard practice. The Magog invasion does seem to be imminent. The Allies are all in position except one. That's Turkey. That's why we watch Turkey with such interest. When does it appear? You've heard our views there. The Intelligence Digest published by the DeCourcy family for 60 years. It scooped the CIA more than twice. They have gone on record saying they believe the Kremlin decision has been made. It's a question of strategic positioning as far as timing is concerned. So if Turkey is going to be, will Turkey be rebuffed by the European Union, thus cast its lot with the Islamic East? That's what I've always leaned to as a suggestion. That could be the final thing to set up Ezekiel 38. Or there may be a different scenario altogether in view here. If Turkey is admitted to the European Union, the officers, the 3 stars that I was able to talk to when I was at the Air War College recently, are optimistic. They think they're going to be admitted. Well, if they are, if Europe does pick them up, maybe that'll signal a strategy that maybe if Europe acquires in that direction, the next acquisition would be Syria and Iraq. And that would give the European Union the same borders of the ancient Roman Empire. And we do know that the Antichrist will come out of Assyria, that region. So that's kind of exciting. So if Turkey does get admitted, that could imply including Assyria. Or on the other hand, would a Magog disaster leave a power vacuum for an emergent leader to come on the world stage? You see, there is a likelihood of a major nuclear event. How would a preemptive nuclear strike in the Middle East impact this horizon? In Ezekiel 39, verse 6, God says, I'll send fire upon Magog and among them that dwell carelessly in the isles, and they shall know that I am the Lord. This hint, just a hint, in verse 6, has caused some scholars to suspect, possibly, that the hailstones of fire on Magog are our missiles, and that we in turn take hits in between. This might be the mechanism by which God finally does judge America. We shall see, and we shall see. Again, the challenge is do your homework, find out what's going on, and remember what Jesus said, therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. So all this is interesting. You can lay your little charts, you can make your scenarios, it doesn't matter. Because the next major event on the planet Earth is the gathering of Christ's believers in anticipation of a lot of things that we're going to talk about when we get to those passages in Daniel. Let's stand for a closing word of prayer. This has been a bit of an excursion from our verse-by-verse study of Daniel itself. We felt it was an appropriate addendum to hit this head on. But for next time, read Daniel chapter 6 and try to figure out who the Rab Magi is and what that really means. And see if you can figure out what that has to do with Christmas. We'll talk about that next time. Let's bow our hearts for a word of prayer. Father, we just thank you for who you are. We thank you for your word. We thank you that you've chosen to do nothing but that which you reveal to your servants, the prophets. We thank you that your plans are here, if we can but discern them. And we know, Father, we can't discern them but by your Holy Spirit. So we do ask you, Father, through your Spirit, to illuminate your word to our hearts and lives, that we might better understand what it is you would have of each of us in the days that remain. We do pray, Father, that you would just draw us ever closer to you and help us, each of us, to grow in grace and in the knowledge of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, that we might be more fruitful stewards and more pleasing in thy sight as we commit ourselves into your hands in the name of Yeshua, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. God.